while there it was rough. Lately I've been doing better than the last 4 cold Decembers I recall. And I see my family every month. I found a girl my parents love. She'll come and stay the night, and I think I might have it all. And I thank God every day for the girl He sent my way. But I know the things He gives me, He can't take away. And I hold you every night. That's a feeling I wanna get used to. But there's no man who's terrified as the man who stands to lose you. Oh, I hope I don't lose you. Please stay. I want you, I need you, oh God, don't take these beautiful things that I've got. Please stay. I want you, I need you, oh God, don't take these beautiful things that I've got. Please don't take. It's got my mind, I'm feeling sane. It's been a while, but I'm finding my faith. If everything's good and it's great, why don't I sit and wait till it's gone? Oh, I tell you, I know I've got enough. I've got peace and I've got love. But I'm up all night thinking I might just lose it all. Please stay. I want you, I need you, oh God. Come take these beautiful things that I've got. Please stay. I want you, I need you, oh God. I need these beautiful things that I've got.
Stress, exhaustion, and wondering what on earth you can do about it. If you can relate to any of that, you are in the right place. Welcome to Crosspoint. My name's Abby, and just like that song, I think all of us are looking and longing for more beautiful things in our lives. And we believe that God has something for you today as we continue to look at how we can opt out of the burnout society. I'm your host today at Crosspoint Online, and we're so excited that you're tuning in with us. We'd love to hear from you. The best way to do that is to simply scan the QR code or fill out the form next to the stream. Take a minute, tell us about yourself. And if it's your first time with us, be on the lookout for a gift coming your way this week because we think it's pretty cool that you're checking out church for the first time. Now, before we head back to the venue, just a couple of things I'd like to tell you about ways you can connect here at Crosspoint beyond the weekend service. Do you ever find yourself having questions about faith and doubts, wondering about our existence, if God really was the creator of all things? Or perhaps you have friends that ask questions like that and you're just not sure how to respond. We've got an amazing event coming up on May 18th called Faith and Doubt Night. Faith and Doubt Night is going to be right here on the Crosspoint campus where we'll host a conversation between a Christian humanist, a secular humanist, and a pastor. An evening on God, faith, and the big questions that we all have. This is an evening of truth-seeking amongst friends, plus it's a rally to end modern slavery, meaning while the event is free, donations will be received and 100% of them will go to combat human trafficking and modern-day slavery, something that we can all agree on. Plus, we'll have a pub theology after party where you can ask questions, enjoy a beverage, continue the conversation. So sign up today, let us know you're coming, and invite some friends to come along with you. Hey, students and parents of 7th through 12th grade students, Crosspoint Student Ministries meets every weekend here on the Crosspoint campus. And this weekend, we are talking about how to talk to God, tackling questions like, what is prayer really? How does prayer work? What do we do when it doesn't seem to work? What is the deal with God's will and more? So So if you're a 7th through 12th grade student or have one, we would love to see you this Sunday night right here on the Crosspoint campus at 6 p.m. One last thing, if you are looking to get connected beyond the weekend service, we've got our next Explore Crosspoint event coming up soon, and we want to invite you to join us for this 1-hour session and just all-around fun experience with some great people, including our staff team, where we'll share a bit about what this place is all about, where we're going, as well as how you can discover ways to get connected beyond the weekend service. So whether you're here for the first time or you've been curious, attending for a while, we would love to spend an hour with you. All you have to do is let us know on the connection card or click the QR code to sign up today. All right, we've got a great service today. We're looking at how technology may be causing burnout in your life and my life, and how we can effectively manage our screen time. So to get us headed in that direction, let's take a look at some of the scenes from the documentary, The Social Dilemma.
You know, a few years ago, my wife and I had this thing called the Movie Pass, which we love to see movies. And it was a subscription you get every month that allowed you to watch one movie a day. You go to one movie in the theater every single day. And we, on a particular day, had a movie that was something we wanted to see, and it didn't do well in the theater. So we're like, man, we got to see this tonight because it's not going to be in here very much longer. And this is going to sound like so super spiritual when I tell you what the movie was. But I like this guy. It was a movie about the Apostle Paul. We talk about him a lot here at Crosspoint. And so we were trying to reserve the movie on our app, and it wouldn't let us reserve the movie. So, you know, we just decided we're going to go to the theater and just show up, say, hey, we got the movie pass, and we want to see this movie. We get to the theater, and the reason that it wasn't showing up and populating in the app is because the projector had broken in that theater, and they had to close it down. And so we're standing there at the box office looking up at all the movies that are showing, and the only one that was within 2 hours of that moment where we were standing there was this movie right here, Ready Player One. And I looked at my wife and I'm like, Julie, put a pencil in my eye and kill me now. I don't think I can do it. And I'm not into fantasy movies, not into sci-fi. I just don't enjoy that genre. And so she like pleaded with me. She's like, Curt, please, let's see this. I mean, we plan to be out and go to a movie, and I'm sure it'll be better than we think it is. And so we actually went to this movie. It was back in 2018. And this actually became my favorite movie that year. And one of the reasons is because it was set in a unique setting. It was set in 2045, so about 25 years into the future. It was set in Columbus, Ohio, so in the Midwest here. There's some relatable things, but the context of it was very dark. Everything was, the world was just depressed, and everybody was weighted and stressed and exhausted, and it was unique because every single day people would get up, and instead of going to work or going to school the way that we do, today, they would actually go to this cube that everybody had their own cube, and they were stacked in the city, and they would get into this cube, into this space where there's a multi-directional treadmill, and they put on a VR goggle set and a VR suit, and they would basically live their life through, virtual reality. Everything they do, interact with throughout the day, from work to school to relationships, everything was done through, virtual reality. And I just remember stepping back out of that after we saw this movie, and I thought, well, gosh, that's only 25 years or so from now. What in the world would cause us to, live that way? And then a couple years later, the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden we're virtual on all these fronts. I'm like, so we just got a lot closer to that than perhaps I ever thought we would be. And one of the reasons I love the movie is because it really wrestled with the reality of how do we live in the digital world? How do we live? Because that's just a part of our lives. But also, how do we satisfy the needs that we have for in-person connection and there to be something more than just a virtual digital experience? And that's kind of what that movie is all about. And that's what we're going to be going after this weekend. And so we're going to kind of figure out, okay, what is our relationship with the digital world and screen? So, man, welcome to Crosspoint. Excited to have you guys here. You guys excited this weekend to be tackling this? Man. Tell you what, a lot of energy in the room. If you're here for the first time, we're excited you're here. My name's Curt, and you've caught us on week 3 of this series, the Burnout Society, where we're trying to opt out of this society, by the way. Not a society we want to be in. And today we're going to be, connecting with this idea of what's the role of screens and the digital world in our life, which, speaking of, we got people tuning in on the other side of a screen. Let's make some noise for those tuning in across our online platform. Excited to have you guys join us. As you can see, this is a world we live in. We have to figure out how to navigate this. In fact, I saw an article not too long ago, and it kind of made me laugh. I don't know if it'll make you laugh, but it was funny because in light of that experience going to Ready Player One, and then, we had done some other series and topics in like 2018-19 on how to navigate the digital world, how to manage screen time, how to function in a high achiever culture with all the digital, realities and so on. And then this article came up in March 2020, and it says coronavirus ended the screen time debate. Screens won. I'm like, all right, well, that just got solved right there, because that's really kind of what happened. We realized that when we went through that season, this world is here to stay. And so I want to show you something that is really just kind of a bit of a comparison that helps us, wrap our minds around this. This first picture I want to show you was from 1998, and this is like basketball great Reggie Miller. Reggie Miller fans in the house this weekend? Oh, man. You might remember this game. This was 1998 against the Knicks. This was the iconic game where Reggie went off for 8 points in 9 seconds, brought the Pacers back for a win. And I want you to just pay attention to how the fans are engaging right here. I mean, check out how, they're leaning in, right? They're on the court. This was like Reggie against Spike Lee is pretty much what that was, and the New York Knicks. You can see Spike Lee right there in the court. They're right there. And so just remember this image right here, and then look at this one. If we fast forward a bit to February 2023, a year ago, this is LeBron James when he set the scoring record for the NBA. And, best player ever to play in the history of the NBA right there. And I know some of you are like, this church is blasphemy. I'm never coming back here. But I want you to take a look. When he set the scoring record, take a look at the difference in this picture right here. Just look at the fans. Notice the difference in the experience. Every single person's got a screen between them and the game. Every single one. And it just shows us the difference of what's taken place in the world over 25 years. Because we experience the world through screens today. And we're surrounded by them. And in fact, one of my favorite places that's increasingly becoming one of my favorite places, Julie and I have done a lot of trips over the last few years, is New York City. Love New York City. We love everything about New York City. We love Broadway. We love, the subway. We love all the iconic places you can visit in one day. We love the diversity. Just so many things about New York City we love. The one thing I really don't love about New York City is Times Square. And if you've ever been there, there's so much going on. People are trying to sell you stuff, and you got all these screens everywhere, and people are walking up half naked, and that's just the people in our group. That's not even everybody else. And so, but the advertisements on the screens, I just look around, and it's oh my gosh, it would be awful to live in this environment where you're just surrounded by advertisements coming at you all the time. And then in that moment, you look down, and I'm like, oh, but I actually have that in my hands all the time. And all you have to do is recognize that, when you got your phone in your hand, that overwhelming, oversaturated feeling that I at least feel when I'm in Times Square, I'm like, that happens all the time. That's sitting in my pocket, and it's in front of my face all the time, creating distraction and, draining me and stressing me out, at times with things coming in. And so this is just something we have to wrestle with, and we're going to dive into how this contributes to our burnout. In fact, I think if Jesus were here today, I think, if he were doing a 2024, Sermon on the side of a mountain, like Sermon on the Mount 2024. I think, if we were there, we'd be having our devices and we'd be like, hey, we'd be like, hey, Jesus, do another one of those miracles so we can capture it. And quit with all the conviction and all that. But how about another miracle so we can screenshot and say we're here? Because this is what we do. And I think Jesus would probably be like, perhaps we need to have a conversation about this thing that's always between you and me. And not necessarily just between him and us, but this thing that gets in the way of us really experiencing life to the fullest extent that he created for us. So just a couple disclaimers as we dive into this weekend. As far as we know, Jesus did not have any teachings on technology in the iPhone, just so you know, all right? He didn't have the 10 Commandments on how to handle Tinder. He didn't have this hey, you've been down, and if I swipe left, everybody's guilty. He was none of that, all right? I really don't believe at all that the locusts in the Old Testament were the original Angry Birds. Some people are like, oh, that was the beginning. No, I don't think that. Moses did walk down the mountain with some tablets, but we don't really know what brand they were, so we don't even know that. So, so the Bible doesn't really say a lot about technology or anything, and I'm not going to try to make it say something just because we wanted to say that. And then the second thing that I think is important is this is a no judgment, zone right here. All right, so this is kind of a judgment-free zone. Because, I mean, listen, if you look around at Crosspoint, we got screens everywhere, right? You got them in front of you. I got 2 in front of me. I got a third one on the wall. If you walk into the Commons, there's screens everywhere. So, I mean, this is a part of our world. Phones, are not bad. Screens are not bad. All right, we're not going to be like, burn your phone like we did, our CDs back in the 90s. Burn your CDs, And some of you are like, what is a CD? That's a history lesson for another time. And so, what are we talking about today? Well, we could talk really for the rest of the year about this topic. And if we had more time, we would even get into the reality that you're not even a customer in this for the most part. I mean, you're probably more of the product. In fact, if you want some fun homework, it's one of our next steps this weekend. Maybe check out that documentary that we showed the trailer to you on a moment ago. That's The Social Dilemma. It's on Netflix. And that could just be one of your next steps this week. And one of the best quotes from that documentary is this. It says, if you're not paying for the product, then you are the product. You are the product. And, so we're going to talk a bit about that. We're going to talk a bit about how, the promise of the internet actually was to bring people together. And yet, statistically, all it really shows is that it doesn't really foster diversity or coming together. It actually fosters division, and it leads to a lot of extremism and a lot of extreme thoughts. We could talk about how politics get involved in all this, and how, you and I, we don't get online to necessarily get involved in politics, and yet, you get online to connect with your family, or you get online to do some research, and yet you can't escape the political noise. And then we have to ask the question, why are 5% of the political ads, posted by 6% of the users? And then, of course, there's the whole AI conversation, and some of you are like, I like AI, and others are like, I think AI is actually one of the worst things in the world. I'm convinced one of the worst things in the world is, when you get into a group chat and an Android joins, right, and it goes green. And some of you are like, oh, Curt, you're not my friend anymore. That's the real problem. Yeah, you guys agree with me on that, don't you? Here's the thing, though. What we're going to look at today is the screens debate is over, all right? That's the screens won, all right? We're in this world today. And so the question I really want us to dig into is, how do we make sure we're living well in this? How do we make sure in the hybrid world that we live in, how do we figure out and know how to come up for air when we need to come up for air? How do we make sure we have the peace that God designed for us, and we're not just constantly driven by all this? And how do we help our students navigate this? And at the same time, I don't want to overlook the positive parts of social media and internet and screens and devices. I mean, so many positive things in terms of connectivity. Some of you work in social media, or you're just really big in influencing, and you're doing good work. You're trying to encourage people. Keep that up. There's so many good things. And then, like even with our kids, like my daughters, they love it. And they'll come to me. Maybe if you're a parent or a grandparent or, uncle or aunt or something, you might have these conversations. But like one of my daughters will come and she'll just be like, Dad, would you please do a TikTok with me? And the answer is always no. It's like, no, it's just not my thing. And she'll like plead and just, hey, Dad, it's just a short little video. You don't have to do much. You just have to say this. And she will wear me slap down. And finally, I will cave in, and I'll end up doing something ridiculous like this right here.
I work all night, I work all day to pay the bills I have to pay. Ain't it sad? And still there never seems to be a single penny left for me. That's too bad. In my dreams, I have a plan. If I got me a wealthy man, I wouldn't have to work at all. I'd fool around and have a ball. Money, must be funny in a rich man's world.
It's so embarrassing, right? Like that, I always want to put myself out there at my expense just so you could get a laugh or two. But it creates connection, right? And then she doesn't relent on it. She just keeps going. She's like, Dad, just one more. I'm like, I'm not doing it. And then this happens.
Standing in a crowded room and I can't see your face. Put your arms around me, tell me everything's okay. In my mind, I'm running around a cold and empty space. Just put your arms around me, tell me everything's okay.
Anybody else do this with your kids? Anybody? Okay. I mean, because I am so bad. I'm so awkward. So awkward. But, but it creates connection. It allows me to get a bit into her world. And here's the reality on this. We have become very, very attached to our phones, right? I mean, I saw a number of stats recently. One was that 75% of Americans can actually reach their phone without ever moving their feet 24 hours a day. Just think about that for a moment. I got a lot of questions about that. Like, how does that work, like, in the bathroom? Like how does that work when you're, a lot of questions. 19-year-olds were recently surveyed, and they were asked, would you rather have a broken finger or a broken screen? And you know what the answer was, right? Like, well, I got 9 other fingers. I certainly can do without one, right? And so, like, it's that big of a deal. Gen Zers and, over half of them self-report, get this, spending over 10 hours a day on their devices. And the irony of that is the app that most of them are on is that one right there I just showed you. I mean, it actually has the name of what's happening. TikTok, you're wasting time. It's telling you what's happening. Millennials, Gen Xers, that's myself. We're not absolved from this either. I mean, if I'm honest, admit that there's moments where I feel like Paul Rudd's character in, This Is 40, where I'm going to the bathroom just to get a little scroll time in, right? Like, I'm like, oh, let me just play a game in here. And this is why today they're saying that scrolling is the new smoking. All right, because you know how nice it is to get out of a meeting and just like scroll for a bit, just like, have a moment to like just, scroll. It's not necessarily, good for us, but we like doing this. And of course, none of this actually is happening by accident. In fact, Sean Parker, who was one of the original creators of Facebook, he actually, in the movie The Social Network, a different movie, this was a 2010 movie on the makings of Facebook. He was played by Justin Timberlake, by the way, in the movie. He's now kind of done a 180 on this. He's like, I just don't know. He has some regrets about this. And here's something he said recently in an interview. He said, God only knows what it's doing to our children's brains. He says the thought process that went into building these applications, Facebook being the first of them, was all about how do we consume as much of your time and your conscious attention as possible. Just reread that last line there. How do we consume as much of your time and your conscious attention as possible? And that means that we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because, someone likes or comments on a post or whatever, and that's going to get you to contribute more content, and that's going to get you more likes and more comments. It's a social validation feedback loop, exactly the kind of thing that a hacker like myself would come up with because we're exploiting the vulnerability of the human psychology. Welcome to the Burnout Society. This is in some cases why we feel the way that we do. And I just think it's wild that the developers who actually put so much of this in motion, people like Sean Parker who designed this, he's saying with every click, with every swipe, we're actually trying to get you to a place where if you don't tap it again, you experience things like anxiety and insomnia and irritability and depression and craving and fatigue. They're actually trying to get us to feel those things so we continue to go back to it. And if you could describe the Burnout Society in 6 words, I think this is a good description of it right here. In fact, I want us to take a look at another clip from the Social Dilemma. And this talks a bit about the dilemma of how this is actually playing into our mental health and specifically teenagers, but I think it actually affects all of us. Take a look at this. I don't think it's just teenagers. I think we all feel the effects of this. Again, this anxiety, insomnia, irritability, depression, craving, fatigue. Could it be that our society is living in a state of digital withdrawal and we don't even know it? We don't even know it because, so much of these symptoms are showing up in our life. I think what's fascinating about this is, anxiety is a symptom. It's a symptom of our body trying to tell us something. Depression is actually a symptom. People used to think that depression was solely just a chemical imbalance in the brain. And in 1978, there was a guy by the name of George Brown, and he actually said, that just doesn't feel right to me. I think there's more to it than this. And so what George Brown discovered was that depression wasn't just caused by a chemical imbalance. He said it's actually caused by things we experience. There's traumatic events, there's toxic lifestyles that we can begin to live, and those events, that toxicity and that trauma that we experience, we have a hard time breaking away from the hold of that in our lives. And what it does is it actually changes the brain's chemistry. And so it's not just an imbalance of the brain, but it's actually these events, these traumatic events, and this toxic lifestyle that merged with, the way it changes our brain that actually leads at times to depression. In fact, it used to be this kind of like, well, if you have depression, there's just something wrong with you. And that's not it at all. George Brown was basically saying, depression doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It's trying to tell you that there's something not right in your environment. That there's something wrong in our orbit. And there was another guy that came along a little more recently, and this is a guy by the name of Johann Hari, and he basically said, there's kind of 9 true causes of depression, and 7 or 8 of them, it's interesting, are actually, connected socially. And so if you could kind of sum up his findings in a couple words, here's kind of what he kind of boiled it down to. He said, depression basically equals disconnection. All right, when we experience these things, this trauma, these moments that maybe we have some toxic ways that we're living, it actually triggers something, and a lot of that has to do with disconnection. And he listed actually the 9 causes for depression and this disconnection. In fact, here's what he said. He says this disconnection comes from disconnection from meaningful work, disconnection from other people, disconnection from meaningful values, disconnection from childhood trauma, and there's an asterisk next to that one because that one's kind of starred because the disconnection happens there that if you had something traumatic happen earlier in your life, it actually creates a disconnection in you, a void because of that trauma. He said it creates when there's a disconnection from status and respect, disconnection from nature, the natural world. We just heard that in the video. Disconnection from a hopeful future and a secure future. And so he also went on to say there's a couple other factors that play into this as well, one being genes. He said, 37% of depression is, connected to, is heredity. It's based in your genes. And that doesn't mean that if your mom or your dad had depression that you're automatically going to have depression. What it means is if you experience some kind of trauma, if you, kind of take on a toxic lifestyle, then 37% of people that are in those 2 camps are likely going to experience a depression. And so the other kind of factor, he said, is neuroplasticity, which you can get all nerded out on neuroplasticity. It's a really cool thing, but the bottom line is basically your brain changes based on your thoughts. Now, why am I telling you all this? What's the point of all this? The point is we have a device in our hands almost all the time that promises connectivity, and yet it's making us more disconnected than perhaps we've ever been. And it contributes even to our disconnection from other people. In fact, I recently saw a statistic that said that basically when you are lonely, the effects on your body are similar to experiencing some kind of physical attack. It contributes to disconnection, with meaningful value. And we talked about this last week, and we talked about how advertising basically says, hey, you're not enough. You need our product in order to be enough. And it creates disconnection due to childhood trauma. Here's what's interesting. Did you realize the word Facebook shows up in 66% of all divorce papers across the United States of America? And what that means is that, if you have kids, you might be carrying around in your pocket an app that actually could contribute to the childhood trauma of your children. There's a disconnection from status and, respect. I mean, that never happens on the internet, right? Everybody's so respectful when you're in a chat room. It always goes so well. There's a disconnection with nature, with the natural world. That's something the pharmaceutical companies can't, prescribe anything on. They don't have a solution to that. There's a disconnection in terms of just hopeful and having a secure future. In fact, I heard just this week on the radio, I was listening to somebody that had some really meaningful insight. He plays a lot of the music from the 70s, 80s, and today. And he said this. He said, there's a connection between gratitude and not feeling bored, because when you have gratitude, you feel more of a sense that you're tied into hopeful and purposeful things. And I'm like, wow, almost like he was listening to what we were talking about last weekend. And so, there's just something that happens, when we're about purpose. You could almost argue, as we think about all this stuff, that to be disconnected from these things actually leads us to be disconnected from our Creator and disconnected from God. I mean, because in a real sense, it really puts a barrier between us and us living the fullness of what God created us for. One more article. I want to share one more thing with you, and then we're going to kind of turn the page here and look at a couple things God, gives us some tools on for this. This was an article in The Atlantic, and it says, have smartphones destroyed a generation? I just want to read you a bit of this, and then we're going to get to a bit of happier waters. Here's what they said. You might expect that teens spend so much time in these new digital spaces because it makes them happy. But most data suggests that it does not. The results could not be clearer. Teens who spend more time than average on screen activities are likely to be unhappy, and those who spend more time than average on non-screen activities are more likely to be happy. There's not a single exception. Pay attention to that phrase right there. Look at that. There is not a single exception. All screen activities are linked to less happiness, and non-screen activities are linked to more happiness. They go on, they say the more time teens spend looking at screens, the more likely they're to report symptoms of depression. Since 2007, that was the year the iPhone came out, the homicide rate among teens has actually declined, but the suicide rate has increased. In 2011, for the first time in 24 years, the teen suicide rate was higher than the teen homicide rate. Man, this just begs a really interesting kind of observation and question right here. Why is it today, more than any other time in the history of our world, that teenagers, the person they hate the most is themselves? Article goes on, it says, if you were to give advice for a happy adolescence based on this survey, it would be straightforward. Put down the phone, turn off the laptop, do something, anything that does not involve a screen. I think we all know that. I think that none of that's new news. I think the question is, can we do that? And so in the spirit of like trying to help us, it's okay, what are some of the ways that we can work through this and really, operate to, get the best out of life and yet take advantage of technology? I want to take a look at one verse from the New Testament. This comes from the Apostle Paul, and he's instructing people on what God's like heart for people who are following him and really his whole creation is. And here's what he says. He says, I have the right to do anything, but you say not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. And so Paul's writing this in the context, in this case, of relationships and sexuality. All right, again, so I'm not trying to make this into something that it's not. He's not necessarily talking about technology, but I think this verse could apply to any situation, whether it be money, whether it be, substances, whether it be technology. Certainly applies to technology right here. And so I want to break this down for us a bit. He first says, I have the right to do anything, you say, but not everything is beneficial. What does that mean? What he means by this, in other words, he's saying there are things that I could say yes to, and it's not like a right or wrong thing. It's not like, well, God says, hey, this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing. He says, no, you actually have options. But it would actually be better if I say no to it. I don't know how many times you bump into moments like this in your life where you're like, hey, I totally can do this. There's nothing wrong with this, but I think it's just better that I don't. That's what he's saying right here. And then he goes on, he says, I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. All right, so there are things probably in your life like there are in my life where you can say yes to them, all right? But the thing is, if you say yes enough times to them, you're going to develop a trend where it's going to be hard to ever say no to them. For instance, one of the things I think we can all connect with is why is it that we wake up every single morning and the first thing we do is we reach for what? Our device. And then we begin to scroll. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not like Paul's saying, hey, don't ever do that. God doesn't have any input on that. He just says, hey, you got to ask the question, like, if I just say yes and do that all the time, then it's going to become really hard to break that pattern and say no. I think that's why Thoreau actually said, we've become tools to our tools. And so what the Apostle Paul is telling us right here, he's saying, hey, look, this isn't about right or wrong. All right, we get so caught up in right and wrong. Christians are really good saying, this is right, that's wrong. Everybody, you're right, you're wrong. That's not the narrative right here. All right, I could hammer out, this is right, this is wrong. We sound so religious on this topic. I don't know that any of us are interested in religiosity, but we do have a deep spirituality that we're trying to say, okay, how do I experience more of that? And see, here's the reality. In the burnout society, there are no limits. There are no limits. And so this conversation is about what's wise right here. This is about what's the wisdom here. And Paul is giving us an amazing gift in this little verse right here. What he's saying, and here's the thing, maybe technology is not your deal. Maybe you're like, I don't really struggle with that. I don't have a bad relationship there. But this could apply to whatever gray area is there for you. Meaning Paul gives us one of the most amazingly clear templates right here to evaluate all the gray areas in our life. And he says, basically, there's two thoughts. He says, is it beneficial and are you being mastered by it? That's what this verse says right here. So every time you run into something that you're like, this doesn't seem real clear. It's kind of gray. I'm trying to figure out, should I stop doing this? Am I in too far? Should I pull back? He just says, these two questions right here. Is it beneficial and is it mastered? So these are the two questions I want us to kind of think through, and then we're going to wrap up. All right, and so as you think about what your life looks like in relationship with, screens, with the digital world, with social media, I want you to ask yourself this first question right here. Is it beneficial? Is what I'm doing and the way I'm operating, is it beneficial to me right now? All right, you have the right to do anything, right? God's not like, hey, this is right, that's wrong. This is one of those gray areas. And listen, we're not going to be like, hey, we want to monitor your screen time. That's not our job. You might want to do that. That's totally cool. But you have the right to do anything. The question is, what's beneficial for you right now? In fact, one of the questions that Abby, helped us process through in the first week of this series was, what is it that you want? And I think that's just a fascinating question because we rarely, spend just any time at all saying, okay, what is it that I really do want? I think that'd be a good question right here. I mean, as we think about our relationships with the digital world and technology and screens, what do we want? Is it leading us to the life that we want? Is it leading you to the family that you want? Is it leading you to the relationships that you want? Is it leading you to the marriage that you want? Is it leading you to the kids that you want? And if our current relationship with technology, if it doesn't have the boundaries that are leading us to what we want, if it's not working for us, then, what could we do? What might we need to change? Now, something I'm really excited about, you're going to receive this when you walk out today. And for those of you tuning in online, there's a button where you can download this right next to the stream today. You're going to receive a little prevention plan right here. This is the Burnout Society Prevention Plan. And this is going to be something that has all the subjects we're talking about. Last week we talked about finances. This week, the digital world. Next week we're going to talk about how do we rest and do we have the ability to stop and rest. And it gives you a place to kind of ask, okay, what's working for me? What's not working for me? What are some of the changes I need to make? This might be a really good thing to work through with your roommates if you live with a group of people, or with your partner, your spouse, or your family. It might be a good family conversation to just say, okay, what does it look like for us to map out a plan? Because if we're not getting to the end result we want, what are the changes we need to make? And if you're looking for some additional resources, a great book called The Tech-Wise Family. And this is by Andy Crouch. And if you have kids or grandkids and you just want to dig a bit deeper into this with some very practical tools, we've actually got this book available in the Commons today. You can pick it up at Connection Point. It's $10. And there's a little QR code so you can just scan it, pay for it, take it with you. But there's some great questions, and it would give you a really good template to work through some of this and say, okay, what does this look like for our family? In fact, one of the great quotes out of this book, Andy says this. He says, every single one of us need to pause from your phone 1 hour a day, 1 day a week, and 1 week a year. You might say, well, how does that work? Well, that might be a vacation where you just totally disconnect, for that particular week. For me, when it comes to, 1 day a week, my Fridays are that day oftentimes. Sometimes you can't get the whole Friday, but Friday's my day off. And so I'm at home, and I really try to stay totally unengaged from work, and I'll put my phone on the charge. I don't carry it around in my pocket that day. Sometimes my kids are like, Dad, we couldn't get a hold of you. I'm like, I am so sorry. I wasn't trying to not be connected to you. I'm just trying to not be available to the rest of the world. And so, it was really difficult at first because I would always be reaching for it. And what if somebody needs me? And I began to discover that's more about me than everybody else. But now it's amazing. And one of the things I've discovered is that free day is actually a lot longer than it used to be because I'm not taking up all kinds of time. I'm actually reclaiming time that I used to spend, always responding to everything coming at me. Perhaps that's a plan you could adopt. One reason perhaps it might be worth trying this is, the problem isn't that you have access to the web and social media and all those things. It's not your access that you have. The problem is all of that has access to you. And so developing a plan to where I don't have to be on all the time. Maybe your plan could be, something like doing something with your devices at times, having a device-free dinner, a device-free party. And, and then you have to ask the existential question, if we're there at the party and we don't get a selfie, did it really happen, right? Like, whew. Did it happen if I didn't record it? How about you do the research and let us know, all right? Let us know how that comes out for you. In-person interaction, we heard that in one of the interviews a few minutes ago. This is a whole thing, right? Post-COVID, this is hard for some of us. We're like, I know, I can choose the exact emoji if I'm texting. I know exactly what emoji tells how I feel, but in person, man, I feel like Ricky Bobby at times. Like, I don't know what to do with my hands, right? We're like, I get stuck. I reach for my phone. I don't know what to do. And so sometimes, it's just awkward, but this is such a helpful thing for us, doing, interfacing face to face. And for parents, one of the questions that would be really helpful for parents, and this is kind of a painful question, but how do we make sure that our kids are more important to us than what's going on our device? And I say that because if I'm honest and we're honest, and this is horrible, but I've been there, you've probably been there, where there's been moments where I felt like my kids felt like, they were like a distraction to what I was doing on my device. I don't want that. And so is it beneficial? That's the first question that I think would be helpful for us to process. The second one, are you being mastered by it? This is what Paul says. Are you being mastered by it? One of the research projects that's been shown over and over on this is that our phones are our number one medicator. Our phones are our number one medicator. And it doesn't matter if you're 17 or 27 or 47 or 67 or 87. If we're honest, one of the number one medications that we reach for when we just feel like, gosh, I need a little hit right now is our device. And here's what a medicator is. Let me just define a medicator. A medicator is anything we reach for to turn up a feeling we want more of or to turn down a feeling we want less of. All right, now, medicators, just to be clear, are not actual medications, right? So if you're on a medication, perhaps the doctor's prescribed, like you need to keep doing that. Instead, medicators in this term right here are things we turn to when we feel a bit disturbed, distracted, or perhaps we're in need of a distraction. We say, okay, I need something to take my mind off this. Medicators are external things we reach for to address internal things that we're feeling. And we all have a medicine of choice. We all have a medicator of choice that we reach to, all right, when the stressors hit in our lives. But one of the things we know about medication is that, there's often, when there's misuse and abuse, there's side effects. And one of the side effects of, medicators is that not all medicators become addictions, but every single addiction starts with a medicator. And so this is, in fact, one of the reasons, we fight really hard to keep Crosspoint as a place, where it's okay not to have it all together. Where we can be like, hey, we can be real, we can talk transparently, and because, I realize, this is a no judgment zone for those who have addictions. I've had addictions in my life. And I know that when you have an addiction, you didn't purposely choose that. What's going on is there's something internally going on, and there's disconnection that you're feeling, and you're reaching for certain things, and maybe somebody told you, hey, if you do this, or if you go after that, it might work, and you did that, and it actually didn't work for you. And one of the things I've discovered is that anytime you turn a tool into a god, it becomes an idol. And there's all kinds of things that are not really helpful about that, but perhaps the biggest problem is that idols can't actually address the core problem. They can't actually heal you. And so, when we talk about medicators, if we put this list up again, these disconnections that we feel, if you're here today and you're struggling, you're exhausted, maybe even struggling with some anxiety and depression, you probably can look at that list and pretty quickly go, oh, I can point out the thing that I'm feeling a disconnection on. All right, you can probably spot your disconnection pretty quickly, that thing you're struggling with, and maybe some of it happened when you were much younger. Maybe there's some childhood trauma, and that's still there. I want to tell you, no medicator that you can come up with can ever possibly repair the disconnection. Alcohol can't do it, pornography can't do it, our phones can't do it. They can mask it, they can numb it, they can, kind of make it go away for a short time, but it can't actually heal it. And the good news is, this is where the person of Jesus actually comes in, because, what we celebrated a few weeks ago at Easter, Jesus actually brings a power and he brings a grace because of what he did on the cross that allows us to actually get a healing in some of those places where we need it the most. And he can repair those disconnections. He can restore and he can redeem. And he can bring the dead, dry places where we feel the disconnection back to life. And I think that's what he wants to do with us. And so I want you to go ahead and stand. I want to pray for us. I want to invite you to pray with me. And I don't know what your relationship with Jesus is. I know for some of us, maybe we're following Jesus and there's just some things that are getting in the way. And we need to say, okay, what's my relationship? What are some of the steps I need to take? Others of us, maybe you're here trying to reestablish that connection with Jesus. And you being here is just that expression. He's the one that actually can, address and bring healing to the core of some of the things. And so perhaps today's the day to just say, okay, Jesus, I want that. I want to go that direction. Let's pray together. God, thank you for these words that Paul gives us that help us just, say, hey, is this beneficial? Is it mastering me? I want to confess to you all the times I've run after so many things to repair the pain in my life. I think it's because I'm a fixer. I think it's because I think it will solve it. And yet I just confess to you right now and repent to you of the times where I haven't gone to you. I've gone to other things instead. And this is our moment right now for us to tell you that we're turning to you instead, that perhaps we've gone after those things, but we want to begin to run in your direction, maybe for the first time. Maybe we just need some reorienting. I pray that you help us to know what to do. because we want that joy that comes in a relationship with you. So would you lead us into that today? As we pray these things, Jesus, according to your character and your power. Amen.
There's a radical love that can enter your life, and it's literally waiting for the chance to open your eyes. It's a radical thought to surrender your mind. Give it all of your doubt and fear away. Make space for the life. Feel the change as we pray. May the God of hope fill our hearts with joy and peace. Let it be as we trust in Him, living now in the overflow. What a living hope. May the God of grace bless our days in the Spirit lead. Let it be as we trust in Him, living now in the overflow. What a radical thing to be fully alive. By your mercy I'm waking up to see this wonderful life. May the God of hope fill our hearts with joy and peace. Let it be as we trust in Him, living now in the overflow. What a living hope. May the God of grace bless our days and the Spirit lead. Let it be as we trust in Him, living now in the overflow. What a living hope. Sing, there's a joy. There's a joy, 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 joy down in my heart. I've got this joy, 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 joy down in my heart, down in my heart. Deepest joy, 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 joy down in my heart. I've got this joy, 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 joy down in my heart, down in my heart. There's a joy, 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 joy down in my heart. I've got this joy, 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 joy down in my heart, down in my heart. Deepest joy, 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 joy down in my heart. I've got this joy, 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 joy down in my heart, down in my heart. May the God of hope fill our hearts with a joy and peace. Let it be as we trust in Him, living now in the overflow. What a living hope. May the God of grace bless our days in the Spirit lead. Let it be as we trust in Him, living now in the overflow. What a living hope. There's a joy, 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 joy down in my heart.
so glad that you've joined us today. I hope that you are feeling some of that joy that you can carry into your week as you allow Jesus to bring restoration and redemption, which is where he does his best work. If you made the choice today to take advantage of the grace that Jesus offers us by taking a step to trust him as your Savior and leader, we are so excited. We'd love to celebrate that with you, so let us know on your connection card. If you're a giver here at Crosspoint, I want to say thank you for your generosity through the Joy Box. And if you're not a giver but would like to become one, you can donate at this QR code or through the Give button. Know that you and your gifts are a part of helping people experience so much goodness, joy, and hope, helping all of us experiencing more and more of the life that Jesus has designed for us through what happens in this place each and every week, including this online broadcast. So thank you. Last thing, if there's something going on in your life right now and you would like someone to pray with you, you can text the keyword need prayer to 317-834-7373 and we'll be in touch with you really soon. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time for part 4 of the Burnout Society.